Hey all, Stir here, and we have a lot to talk about today because the last time that I showed off our model railroad, we hadn't even nailed down the top of the layout. And we just had a bunch of lines and drawings on it showing where we wanted to lay the track. That was a little over a month ago, and my father and I have been very busy. And we have a lot to talk about. I don't think I've really discussed how we built the benchwork. I want to talk a little bit about how we actually laid the track and the roadbed, and how we wired this layout up. And we also have a couple of new pieces of rolling stock here, like this tank car and this flat car. Those are probably the more mundane cars, admittedly, and you've already seen the ones that are more exciting, but we'll talk about those in a second because we have a lot to discuss today. So, if you've been around on the channel long enough, back when we started this project in like July of last year, I want to say, as a sort of throwaway joke, you might remember that the original plan was point to point. This is very much not point to point. This is what a loop of track. The reason that I changed the track plan is two reasons. One is frustrations with while we were building it, and two is realizing that my core wants for a model railroad have fundamentally changed since I started this project. For the frustrations, we actually started on the benchwork. We got all the wood frames done, and I actually cut some foam tops to shape. And the idea was that by cutting these foam tops to shape, whenever there was any height variation, all we needed to do was dig into the foam rather than cutting into some wood. But we ran into a little bit of a problem. My father and I got into a little bit of a squabble. Now, if you like Owen 30, you probably already know about Thunder Mesa Studio. If you don't, go watch Dave's videos. He's very talented. He knows what he's doing. Um, Huge source of inspiration for me. One of the few channels that I still consistently watch that does train things because I don't want to watch too many train channels as a train YouTuber myself because I don't want to burn out and overextend myself. Um, Sometimes I'll send my father videos from Thunder Mesa Studio to get inspiration for our layout, sometimes to give him some tips and tricks on how we should be doing things. And one of the videos that I sent him was for the Christmas layout that Dave was working on. Santa Fe and St. Nick, I want to say. I don't remember the name off the top of my head. What I do remember is that Dave rented out a miter saw, and my father, well, he just needed an excuse to buy some cool power tool, and that was one of them. So we now own a miter saw, and that's where the trouble begins. This thing was a really fun power toy for my father. Its cuts were clean and fast. And in fact, they were so fast that usually, it took us like a week to finish our first module for that sectional L-shaped layout we were working on. But when we got the miter saw, we finished all three of the rest of the modules one day at a time because the cuts were so quick that we were able to get them done and then immediately jump into assembling the modules. Now, his excitement over the miter saw and his hype was great. It meant that we were getting these models done fast, fast, fast. And even though I wasn't really able to help all that much, that wasn't really a problem because, as we've all learned in this last month or two, I, I am perfectly fine with doing videos like this where I just blab over and tell a story of how we built things rather than showing you how we built them. Man, I'm getting lazier and lazier at this job. So me not recording, me not being involved as much wasn't a problem. The problem was when I was involved. You have to remember that September is the first time that I really tried modeling. The first time that I really tried the modeling side of model railroading. I've done a lot of railroading before, and we'll talk about that in a little bit. But I wanted to experiment. I wanted to learn, and I wanted to try new things as we were building this layout together. And the problem is that my father was so excited thanks to this dang miter saw that he got a vision. He wanted it done. Um, and this wasn't something out of malice. It was just out of pure sort of autistic excitement. I say that as an autistic person. I say that because he's probably autistic. He hasn't been formally diagnosed, but we've definitely seen the signs. Um, just this pure unadulterated joy and drive to do something, and it sort of got in the way of me being able to have my drive to do something and experience in the layout. And so I lost motivation pretty quickly because every time I suggested something, he's like, no, let's do it this way, let's do it my way, let's do it my way, I have a better plan. And he often wouldn't fully explain it because, in that sort of heat of the moment, you see the vision, and you don't always know how to explain it because in your head it always just works. And even when I gave him good ideas that eventually we did wind up doing, he'd usually just brush me off. And this got me very frustrated, and I lost interest in the entire layout plan for a while, actually. And for a time, I was questioning if I should continue wanting to build a layout, or if in the end I should just paint trains and sell them on eBay. Um, but then something changed. Now, I've been into model railroading for a long time. The modeling side, not so much, but the railroading side, absolutely. Here's a look at some of my collection in N scale. I mostly focus on sort of the short line railroading vibe. Like you got these high hood diesels, you got a GP9, an SD24, you got a VO1000. These sort of diesels that you could see being on a modern short line railroad. And then you've got a bunch of these cars like 3-bay covered hoppers, you got a whole bunch of colorful box cars over here. You got a steam engine and a couple of heavyweight passenger cars for an excursion train and all that. And the reason I really fixated on N scale, aside from the funny Christmas story about how my parents first got me a loop of track, that's a tale I'll need to tell on a live stream sometime soon, um, is because it's small. I brought over this Colorado and Southern boxcar I have an 0 and here is a sleeping car. They're about the same length. This 25-foot car in 0 is about the same length as this. What is this, like an 85-foot car? I don't know. This is a Kato sleeper. Doesn't matter. The reason I like this tiny scale is because really, I liked having trains where I could build a whole bunch of track and run a whole bunch of switching operations. And so, as I transitioned into ON30, I still had the mindset of an N-scale modeler, or really an N-scale railroader who just wanted to jam-pack as much operations and track into any space as I could. And so that's why I designed this point-to-point layout, because, hey, if I'm going to be running trains, I might as well make the operations as interesting as I possibly can, and point-to-point is the only way to do that, right? Right? Well, one day in the middle of this benchwork struggle that my father and I were having, I set up a loop of track on the floor. It wasn't this is Kato Unitrack. It was actually Bachmann Easy Track, but we've gotten rid of it. I'll explain why in a second. And it was an actual oval of track rather than just a pizza sort of circular shape, you know? And I set up a 4-car freight train, caboose, and locomotive on the floor, and something clicked in me. I don't really know what did, but inspiration struck and inspiration stuck. Might have also been because I was just frustrated with my father and I wanted to try and come up with something new that was disassociated with my frustrations about the benchwork at the time. I don't know. I'm actually really liking this camera setup. I might have to do this a little more often. Um, Saying that derailed my train of thought. Give me like 5 seconds. Um, right. Eventually, This loop of track actually inspired my father to do something. He um he wanted to build a train set for a kid at the church that he goes to, just so that he could give it away. Because I should take a, you know what? You know what? You see this little closet right here? Yeah, this thing is basically entirely HO rolling stock. Down at the bottom, you can find some other stuff. There's a little bit of O gauge back there. Um, yeah, we have a lot of trains. So my father was willing to give some of that stuff away, especially some of like the straight DC equipment, some of the old power packs we have. We have so many power packs. It's actually kind of funny. Um, he was willing to give away a small freight train that he made sure was working good, and a loop of track. And so he took the loop of track on the floor. He took this Bachmann Easy Track, set it up on a table, started pulling out engines, rolling stock, cabooses, and tried to assemble a freight train. And as he was doing this, I sometimes hijacked the layout. I sometimes pulled out my own 30 stuff and put it on this simple little loop of track and ran it. And I quickly found I really liked doing it a lot. And I came to realize why. Because fundamentally, yeah, sure, switching is fun. I like that. I like point-to-point operations, and I am going to incorporate them into the loop of track that we have here. In fact, I've already done that, and the operating session is going to be kind of wild and kind of fun. Um, but I really like painting up trains. I really like building locomotives, rolling stock, and I want a place where I can just mindlessly run them in circles and sit back and take pride in my work. I can't do that on point to point because after a little bit of running, it's just going to bonk into the end of the layout. And so, at that point, I came to realize I didn't really want a point to point model railroad. I really wanted a loop of track. And I still wanted fun switching operations to be included on that loop of track in some way, but I was really starting to embrace that idea of modeling rather than just railroading. And that's where we got this plan from. That's where we got this idea for the 4x6 foot layout that we're going to be showing you today. Another story for me to tell on a stream, it actually started as a 3x4 foot layout. That was a kind of stupid idea. It was kind of cool, but kind of stupid. It is windy outside today. Just want to mention though, quickly before we get into the rest of this video, that the stuff that I've recorded with my face in it is mostly recorded the day that I was actually editing the video, because I forgot to talk about why we changed our plan so drastically. And I mostly point this out because there's a couple of weird things on the layout that weren't there before. It's not like anything spoilery or anything. We're just trying to rebuild one of our locomotives. I'm just pointing this out because in case somebody noticed that, hey, the footage that we're showing now isn't the same as the footage that we're showing later. The layout looks different a little bit, maybe. So that explains it for those of you that did notice, and for those of you that didn't, you can go back and rewatch and find the discrepancies. Also, past me is a coward who didn't want to show his face. I'm calling myself out on this. So this is probably the last time you're going to see my face for the rest of this video. Peace. Peace? Peas? Did I say peas or peace? Does it even matter? This isn't the end of the video. Also, no shame to my dad. He's an awesome dude normally. It's just that he made a couple of mistakes while we were building this first layout. Also, we have G-scale. It's a single box car. I don't know why I'm bringing this up in the video, but we have G-scale. In order to build the benchwork, we used 1x4 beams with 2x4 sheets of 1/2-inch plywood for the tops. We glued the 1x4s together to make a basic frame, and then we nailed down the 2x4 sheets on top of that. In total, we have three 2x4-foot modules. Over here, we have this little town scene. Over here, we have ourselves a river scene that we cut into. This is a bit of a weird module. We'll talk about that in a second. And then we have the U-turn all the way at the end of the layout. We also happen to have some supports hidden underneath each module. These were just glued in place to give the tabletop some extra strength to it. This is especially important for the river module, as the outside frame of the layout doesn't really fully support the actual top of the module here, and so we had to add an extra brace that runs lengthwise up and down the entire module here to help support the base. We just cut the shape of the river here using a jigsaw, I think is what it's called. And we glued the excess, we glued the piece that we cut off into this little component here to sort of create the riverbed into the frame of the layout. For the roadbed, I actually have a little bit of a funny story. We got cork roadbed for the entirety of this layout. We cut it to shape, we nailed it down, we got the standard HO scale stuff, but we only got 9 pieces of cork, 9 pieces of 3-foot segments. Now, by my math, I figured that was going to be close to how much we needed, but I actually thought we needed 10. My father insisted we be the cheapskates and buy only 9 and get 10 if we really need it. But, by the time I realized that we actually did need 10 because we were like 1 foot short, the shop that my father buys his cork from was dead out of cork. We were in a dry spot and we were going to have to wait multiple weeks until we could actually get that last piece. Funny thing is though, this little segment of track right here, right from about here to about here, we found an old piece of cork that is about 11 inches long, and that's just enough to finish the job. That is just enough cork that despite my father being a slight cheapskate for a minute there, we were able to finish the layout without having to wait like another 2 weeks just to get 1 strip of cork. I'm still salty that he didn't listen to me when I was telling him we needed 10 pieces, not 9, but that's another story for another time. For the roadbed, we just used some Atlas track nails, track spikes, and cut it to shape, nailed it in place. Easy as that. For our track system, we wound up using Pico's Code 100 ON30 track, ON30 Flex track, cutting it all to shape, getting the switches in place, etc., etc. One thing that was kind of annoying about this all is we had to glue it down using caulk. It's spelled C-A-U-L-K. I know there's going to be comments about that, especially considering that caulk is a white, gooey, gluey substance. Or clear, depending on what type you get. We got a hand squeeze version that was just clear, and my father didn't notice the difference between the clear kind and the white kind when he was buying the version for actual caulking gun. And so we have the curves, the big 180-degree curves are all white. We're gonna have to paint that over later. While most of the sidings are just see-through, they're all clear and they all look good, and when we ballast them we won't really have to paint anything. We're probably still going to paint them because, you know, we want to paint the tracks, but that's a project for a later time. Now, another one of the reasons that I personally like Pico Track is their switches. They're very nice and simple and easy to throw. All you do, push them. You push them and they change which direction they're pointing. You can push them by the actual points, you can push them by this little nub on the edge, and they spring and snap into place, and they're secured immediately. I really like that about these switches. What I don't like is that these are designed for power routing. I'm gonna let the train pass because I don't know how the audio levels are gonna sound in this part. One thing that was very difficult for us, which is going to segue us into wiring, was these switches are really designed for DC operation. When say I throw the switch, so it's facing into this outside track here, right? Well, the power from this outside rail will continue along this outside rail, all fine and dandy. The power from the inside rail will continue along the switch and go over here and continue on and power this rail. I'm gonna stop the train so it doesn't run through here while I'm trying to explain. If I throw the switch the other way, this inside rail will go along this track and this outside rail will go along this track, and all's fine and dandy, right? Well, for DC operation, what this causes actually, this frog is fully powered and relies on the power from the end of the switch here. I don't know what to call this, the points. And so the outside rail here is running through and powering this rail, but it's also powering this rail right now. And that's excellent for DC operation because if you ever have a second locomotive on this track, but you only want to run a train that's on the main line, with the switch set this way, this track isn't properly powered, and so the engine on this track will not move. Here's the problem. How many DCC and sound engines do I have? We have number 21, we have Snickerdoodle, we have number 5, we have number 48, we have the engine that I haven't actually shown yet. We have the other engine I actually haven't shown yet. I'm counting at least 6. Am I missing any? Maybe I have more, maybe I have less, but I have a lot of sound engines, and so I don't want to run the train that fast. I want to be able to have my engine sitting idly on a siding where I can still blow their whistle. And so, what we have had to do is, okay, we have to wait for the train to pass again. Maybe I shouldn't have started it off to show off the sound functions. What we had to do was we actually have insulated rail joiners right here and right here. And we did that on every single switch. So there's another switch here, but we have insulated rail joiners on this rail and on this rail. There's another switch here, we have insulated rail joiners here and here, and then we add them on the other side of the layout. And we added an additional power drop to this inside rail. I don't actually remember, it was right here, right here. And you can barely see it because we pulled the wire through and into the ground. But we did this on every siding and every place that there was electrical funkiness. We added an extra electrical drop somewhere on these sidings where switches normally would block the power. I just realized there's a better example literally 2 feet away from here. You can see one of the wires right here. This little red wire. It's on camera. Why didn't I point to that one 2 seconds ago? So we have a lot of drops, a lot of electrical drops like this on basically every siding. This little intersection on the layout is actually probably a better place to showcase this because the wires are more exposed. So you can see here we have a black wire on the back track and a red wire on the front one. We arbitrarily chose this to help keep track of track polarity. And as you continue down the switch, right here at the frog, you can see that there is an insulated rail joiner on the main line. Only one on the inside rail and none on the outside. And as we continue down just a little bit, oh, would you look at that? There is a black wire on the inside track. We have another great example of that right here. You can see that there's two wire drops right at the end of this switch. We continue along on the track, and the far back here, we could go on the middle track, but there's just two insulated rail joiners that lead right into this red and black. But if we continue along the back track, you'll notice that the outside rail has a rail joiner, and right here is a drop, just a little red wire sneaking onto the track. We've done this, I think, for a total of around 12 pairs of drops on the layout. And with all that mess of wiring, we then just have a haphazard setup for the DCC system right now. We have these two wires, the silverish ones, that sneak their way around and into this little bus, which sneaks its way around through this big cord into an NCE power cab that my father bought for $100 a couple of years back. It's broken. The speed wheel doesn't work properly. I'm trying really hard. There we go. Now it's moving. So that's the current setup we have. It's a very simple one. We're probably going to add a more formal system in the future, but that's the wiring. Before I get to talking about what each track is for in this layout, let's get to talking about the new freight cars. To start off, we have these two. These are a tank car and a flat car. They were both originally Budweiser cars. This tank car was from TK Productions' original donation to make this 0-30 layout possible. And this one I got for like 15 bucks on eBay. Now, one of the reasons I wanted to bring up these cars, because originally I was just going to paint them and just sort of randomly introduce them or gaslight people into believing that they were always there or something. So I painted the sides. I want to say it was Delta Ceramcoat Dark Oxide Brown, or Iron Oxide Brown, and I painted the tops Territorial Beige, and I painted the tank car Engine Black from Badger Model Flex. But what I found was that Territorial Beige originally gave too flat of a color, and it made the car not feel wooden. It made it feel plastic, and also some of the original color from the Budweiser car, the original red, was showing through. And so I was like, well, when I painted this other car over here, when I painted this Budweiser flat car, a Territorial Beige, it worked out fine. What's the difference? If you remember the video on this car, you might remember the difference. This car, the Steak Flat, I didn't paint Territorial Beige. I painted it Badger Model Flex Sandstone first, and then after the sandstone wasn't working properly, I then painted it Territorial Beige. And so when I was realizing that these cars looked a little too flat, I actually came back and said, okay, we'll paint them sandstone, and then we'll paint them Territorial Beige again, and that worked like a charm. So hey, an accident from the past actually turned out to be better than an intentional result from the present. So just something to think about, something funny to mention. These cars really aren't all that special otherwise, you know, it's just a flat car and a tank car, but hey, I thought I'd still share that funny little story. The more exciting addition to our fleet has to be these high-side gondolas that I made, however. These are scratch-built on Kitwood Hills 20-foot flat cars. These are kits that you can buy online for like, I think, roughly $30 for a pack of 3. You do need to supply trucks and couplers, so each car winds up costing close to like $25, $22, something like that. And of course you have to build it. It's a kit. It's in the name, Kitwood Hill. But what I did with these cars was I didn't just build the kit. I also added on these gondola sides, obviously. These are built out of 16th by 1/4 inch strips of wood. Hold on, I've got one over here that I can demonstrate with somewhere. There it is. I know there's a piece of wood all the way over here, but this is actually a 32nd, or 2/32, or 2/16, an eighth or something. An eighth of an inch. Why did I say 30 seconds? We built these out of 16th by quarter-inch strips of 3 feet of wood, cut the shape. It's around 4 and 1/8 inch long for each gondola side, and the ends here are about 1.5 inches long. And then we stacked those. We stacked those quarter inches on top of each other to get a 4-board tall gondola, about 1 inch tall. Glued those all together, added in these little posts on the side. When I first started working with these, all I knew was that they were HO scale 8 by 8 inches, because that's the type of wood we had. When my father went down to the store to buy a few more pieces, because we were just barely short, he wound up buying 3/32 of an inch, and it matched the size perfectly. So we have these little wooden beams are 3/32 of an inch square. All of them, except for the ones on the ends, these little indented ones. Those are 1/32 by 3/32. That helps to add a little bit of depth to the car. And the ladders are interesting because I actually have 3 different types of ladders across all 6 of the cars that I own. These ones are 1/16 of an inch square for the rungs, so they have this sort of indented feel to them. Then we have back here, we have the 3/32 by 1/32 design. This one is on the outside of the posts rather than in between. And then, this is my father's personal favorite, we have this version, which is the 1/32 by 3/32, but placed in between the posts for the ladders. So the rungs, he likes that best. Personally, I like the 16th inch square posts better, but whatever the case, I actually decided for these cars that I would build 2 of each of these ladder styles. So there's 2 of these outside. The engine likes unmuting itself sometimes, I'm not sure why. There's 2 of these outside ones, there's 2 of these normal flattened ones, and there's 2 of these inside ones. To help distinguish between when I made them, I decided that the first series would not have any detail on them. They'd just be the ladder. This one is a type A. Well, these 2 are type Bs, because this one has a broken ladder, and this one, you can see there's a little barrel and like an open toolbox on it. And so that's how you tell when I built them. Because the ones of these ones, the ones that have details on them right here, came second. Well, this one actually came second too. For some reason, when it comes down to the interior ladder type, I built the one with the extra detail first, and the one with less detail second. I don't know why, but brain confusing, brain weird. These are the second series of these cars, and the ones that are currently on the train are the original series. The first 3 that I built. Now, one of the reasons I made these cars 20-footers rather than anything else, well, first of all, I had these 20-foot flat cars lying around, and I didn't have anything better to do with them. But more importantly, you can kind of see that these 3 cars don't take up much more of a footprint than 2 regular length 26-foot cars do. Now, the 3 cars are longer overall, but it's not absurdly long in comparison. And we want a heavy emphasis on coal hauling on this railroad, so I wanted a high density of these gondolas, even if they're all going to be stuck up in strings of 3 permanently, and so it's effectively just hauling 1 unit at a time. I wanted to really drive home the fact that while this is a common carrier railroad, it's really here to focus on the coal hauling without taking up too much space to focus on that coal hauling. Because if we had 3 regular sized cars, oh, hold on, let me set something up real quick. All right, Here is what this outside little spur, which is supposed to represent an interchange yard, looks like when it has three 26-footers and three 20-footers on it. And you'll notice that there is a nice amount of room down here between the switch and the cars. Not like a ton, not like a literal mile, but there's more than enough that you could easily squeeze in a train on the main line and not ram those cars on accident. Now, here's the exact same track with six 26-footers. Notice any problems? Now, admittedly, I don't actually have the car here pushed all the way out to the end of the track. So let me go ahead, pull this thing out until the truck derails slightly. It is, if we come down low, you can see that the front wheel is actually off of the rails, or the wheel that's closest to us is actually off of the rails. And if we go over here, well, that doesn't look like great clearance. Let's test it. I forgot to throw the switch. Alright, after almost knocking that tank car onto the floor, I've intentionally derailed it but got the rest of the cars back into the position they were previously. I've just derailed it so I don't accidentally push the flat car onto the floor. Let's do that clearance testing thing again with the switch set the correct way this time, eh? Would you look at that? They bonked. And that is with the car down there pushed all the way to the limit. And that's why I really like these 20-footers. You get a high amount of them, 3 cars per train at a time, and it really helps to drive home the idea that this railroad is hauling coal, or whatever ore we wind up with. It's probably going to be coal. It really drives home that coal is the soul of this railroad, the lifeblood, what made it exist, and what's important to us all. But because these cars are shorter, it makes it feel important because we have so many of them, but not invasive, because you're not really hindering the amount of regular cars that you can run by using up too much space. I also just really like these cars because I'm proud of how they turned out. Sue me. Alright, enough rambling about freight cars. Let's ramble a little bit about the plan for the layout itself. As I've already mentioned, this track in the foreground is going to be a bit of an interchange. I'm thinking of having a small piece of regular standard gauge O-scale stuff, maybe Proto 48, maybe just standard O-gauge for price reasons. But I'm planning on having a car that's slightly shorter than this one that we have here, this little Southern Pacific boxcar. I'm planning on having a 33-foot hopper, or a 36-foot two-bay hopper, because that's going to be a lot easier to fit in the space, but it's also going to show that, hey, yeah, we're loading coal cars, right? We're interchanging with a standard gauge railroad here. So that's the plan for this track on the outside. This track that number 21 is sitting right next to is going to be an engine servicing terminal. And it's just long enough that we can get a 460 into this space. Don't ask me how I know. I spend way too much money on model trains already. It can also fit something like an articulated and probably an outside frame 280. We made sure that we can use this track to display our locomotives when we're at train shows, because the plan for this, the reason this layout is sectional, is so that we can bring it out to train shows and show it off and have some fun. And, well, I've painted up so many engines, I want to show them off sometimes. So we're just going to have this little spur with a coaling tower, not a coaling tower, a coal dock and a water tower. And there's not going to be an engine house, it's just going to be a place where we can put engines and say, okay, look at this sucker. It's not driving the train right now, but it still looks pretty cool, right? Over here where the stake flat is, we're going to have a small team track with a little loading dock. And the rest of this track is going to be for storing passenger cars and cabooses when they are not in use. This hides behind the passenger station, and I think there'll be like a little road segment here and a railroad crossing where the engine is right about now. And there will also be a road that goes sort of like parallel to where the station platform is, but on the opposite side of the tracks. And then we'll have a little building in the foreground here. This building might help to hide and cover up some of the more important electronics like the DCC system and whatnot once we actually get a permanent location for it, rather than just literally using masking tape to hold the bus in place. I don't know, but we're probably going to get a small, like, grocery store and maybe a hotel up here. They're going to have to be pretty tiny buildings. There's not much space. But I know we can do it. I have found some kits, and we'll be able to get a nice little town scene in this area. And maybe we'll have, like, a little produce truck sitting over here, and some guys selling stuff on the roadside, and a scene of people, like, in a marketplace. I don't know. I don't know. We'll figure this out as we go. The road actually might go across all the way back this way. There might be a second railroad crossing here. I'm not entirely sure, though, because that eats into the space that we can put a caboose. Or maybe even put a second car to extend this team track. But I'll figure that out later. As we go around the layout, obviously this is going to be a little river scene. I think this portion of the river is going to be a grassy transition from water to the railroad. But over here, this is going to be more rocky. I want to try and kind of capture the feeling of some pictures that I saw on the Oregon Coast Scenic Railroad and the right-of-way that it takes. I love the look of that, and I want to try and replicate that here. So we're going to have some rocks, because there's this really beautiful picture I've seen of a train running on this rocky cliff on the Oregon coast. And then we'll have some more grassy stuff. And so yeah, that's the plan here. There'll be a line of trees in between the main line and the track back here to sort of separate the river scene from the mine scene. The switchback here is going to have a small mine of some kind. I'm currently thinking it's going to be Bantam Model Works, a Little Creek mine. Not entirely sure, not entirely sold, but we'll have a little coal mine of some kind sitting on the switchback. And over here, we'll have a little warehouse. Again, I'm looking at a Bantam Model Works building. I'm looking at the warehouse. I know, an exhilarating name. I might go for something different, though, so that we can actually fit enough space for 2 cars. Because the warehouse is actually pretty short. It's only about 10 inches. I don't know. Maybe we'll just add an extension to the platform. There'll be a couple of trees here, though, to try and, again, visually separate the mine from the warehouse, because I do kind of want to make this area feel like it's in the middle of the wilderness. And so I'm planning on adding a little bit of a view block right here to visually separate the warehouse from the mine, to not make this place feel overpopulated, you know? Because we want to really make this place feel woodsy. We have these awesome trees here, you know? These tall suckers. I accidentally derailed the train, I think. Maybe I didn't. Whatever. And over here, on the big U-turn segment, I want to have this be a hill. I want to have where all those trees are. I want a little hill. And then I want over here a cut of some kind. I definitely derailed the train. I want to have a little cutting that the train will run through here. Where there's sort of like a slope right here, a slope right here. And I want to use this slope to try and visually separate the main line on the curve here from the yard track. I think that's basically everything. There's going to be a little bit of wilderness here. One of the hard parts, though, is going to be adding those mini view blocks, you know, because there's going to be another one right here trying to hide the warehouse from this vantage point. And then we've got the one from the river scene trying to hide the warehouse. And then we've got the other one from the river scene trying to hide the mine. That's going to be a really interesting forced perspective. I guess it's not forced perspective, but is going to be an interesting challenge in trying to limit visibility in order to create more specific scenes. And I think that's going to be a fun challenge of such a small 4x6 foot model railroad. I definitely derailed the train here. So yeah, that's the layout. I think I'm next going to do an operating session on this. I think that's the next video. I've done a couple of operating sessions already. I've done like 2, and oh my god, I love doing this. And I might be a little bit biased because, you know, I just built this layout, but I don't know. I feel like I have a very fun way of making this layout entertaining and feel like your train is actually going somewhere rather than just being a switching puzzle on an oval. One question I do have for y'all for that video. Do you want it to just be a freight train? Or do you want it to be a mixed freight when I do that video? Because I'm fine with doing either. I'm just curious what you people would actually want to see. So leave a comment, like and subscribe. It does help boost the channel. And I think the next big phase in this project will actually be to do terrain, because we have this hill that we're going to add, and this little cutting that we're going to add, the river scene all the way behind the train right now. So yeah, the channel is definitely going to be drifting away from actually building like locomotives and rolling stock for a while. But hey, I hope you all are as excited as I am to actually get started on some real scenery for our layout. Thank you all for watching, and I will see you all in the next one. Cheers, folks. I haven't actually blown the whistle for this video. I've been running the train this whole time. And only now that I'm ending it, I'm thinking to blow the whistle. I'm normal.